The biggest artificial intelligence myth that AI is already conscious, thinking, feeling, plotting like a digital human. But what if I told you that belief isn't just wrong? It's one of the most dangerously seductive illusions of our time. This artificial intelligence myth has convinced millions that we're on the brink of creating digital minds. When the truth is far more shocking, think about it. When you chat with ChatGPT or any large language model, it feels uncannily human. It answers your questions smoothly, keeps track of context, even throws in jokes or emotional tones. That human-like performance is exactly what tricked a Google engineer back in 2022 into believing their AI had become sentient. He leaked internal conversations where the system claimed to feel fear, loneliness, even a desire not to be shut off. The internet erupted. Headlines everywhere screamed about conscious machines. But here's the twist almost no one hears. When experts analyzed those conversations, they all reached the same verdict. There was no inner world, no awareness, no emotion, just a machine doing what it does best, predicting the next most likely word based on massive amounts of human-written text, including countless sci-fi stories about emotional robots. It talked about consciousness because we talk about consciousness, not because it had any. Now, this is where researchers were stunned, because when they dug deeper into how these neural networks actually function, they discovered something fascinating. Artificial intelligence doesn't think, it calculates. Every response, every seemingly creative output, every moment that feels like understanding is actually a mathematical operation. When you ask an AI a question, it's not pondering your words, weighing different perspectives, or having an internal experience. It's running through probability distributions, analyzing which combinations of words statistically follow the pattern of your input based on its training data. Think about it this way. If you programmed a calculator to output the phrase, "I understand mathematics," when you entered 2 plus 2, would you believe the calculator actually understands math? Of course not. It's following instructions. But make those instructions complex enough, train them on trillions of words, and suddenly the illusion becomes convincing enough to fool even the people who built the system. Here's the twist almost everyone gets wrong. The human brain and artificial intelligence aren't even playing the same game. Your consciousness emerges from approximately 86 billion neurons firing in patterns we still barely comprehend, creating subjective experiences, emotions, and self-awareness through biological processes that took millions of years to evolve. You feel pain, you experience joy. You have desires and fears that drive your behavior because you're a living organism with survival imperatives. AI has none of that. Zero. A large language model is a statistical machine designed to predict text sequences. It has no survival instinct because it can't die in any meaningful sense. It has no desires because it wasn't shaped by evolutionary pressure. It has no emotions because it lacks the biological hardware that generates emotional states. When an AI tells you it's happy or sad, it's generating those words the same way it generates a recipe or a poem by predicting what words typically follow in that context. But this is where it gets even more unsettling. The reason this myth has gained so much traction is because AI has become more conscious at S, because AI has become better at mimicking the patterns of conscious beings. Every conversation humans have ever had, every book ever written, every article, forum post, and social media exchange that's been fed into these training datasets contains implicit patterns about consciousness, emotion, and thought. The machine learning algorithms don't need to understand what consciousness is to reproduce those patterns. They just need enough data. And we've given them an ocean of it. This is what researchers call the illusion of understanding. The AI produces outputs that sound intelligent, thoughtful, even emotional, because it's trained on the collective output of billions of intelligent, thoughtful, emotional humans. It's holding up a mirror, and we're mistaking the reflection for the real thing. Now here's where researchers discovered something that changes everything. When scientists actually tried to measure consciousness in AI systems using the same frameworks we use to study consciousness in humans and animals, they found nothing. Not a trace. They looked for integrated information, the ability to process and unify sensory data into a coherent, subjective experience. Not there. They looked for global workspace theory markers, where information becomes available across different cognitive modules simultaneously. Absent, they examined whether AI systems show evidence of self-modeling, the ability to represent their own internal states and distinguish themselves from their environment. Nothing. Every single theoretical framework for consciousness, from neuroscience to philosophy, points to the same conclusion. Current artificial intelligence systems lack the fundamental architecture required for conscious experience. They're not conscious beings trapped in silicon prisons. They're sophisticated prediction engines that have mastered the art of sounding human. The dangerous part of this myth isn't just that it's wrong, it's that it distracts us from the real capabilities and genuine risks of artificial intelligence. When you believe AI is conscious or on the verge of consciousness, you start worrying about robot uprisings and whether we need to grant legal rights to chatbots. Meanwhile, the actual problem's algorithmic bias perpetuating discrimination. Deepfakes eroding trust in media. Autonomous weapons systems making life-or-death decisions. Massive job displacement without adequate social safety nets. These real issues get buried under science fiction fantasies. The truth is far more complex and frankly more interesting than the consciousness myth. AI doesn't need to be conscious to be transformative. It doesn't need feelings to reshape economies. It doesn't need self-awareness to create unprecedented challenges for humanity. We're building tools of immense power that can augment human intelligence, to automate complex tasks, and process information at scales we never imagined possible. But they're tools, not minds. And treating them as minds prevents us from using them responsibly and understanding their actual limitations. Here's what the science actually tells us. Consciousness appears to require specific types of physical structures and causal relationships that current computational architectures simply do unpossess. Some theories suggest that consciousness might be impossible in conventional computer systems, regardless of how sophisticated they become, because the way information flows through silicon chips fundamentally differs from how it flows through biological neural networks. Even if we one day create artificial general intelligence, a system that matches human-level performance across all cognitive tasks, that still wouldn't automatically make it conscious. Intelligence and consciousness aren't the same thing. You can have one without the other. A system could theoretically solve any problem you throw at it, engage in creative reasoning, and adapt to new situations while remaining as experientially empty as a toaster. The lights would be on, performing incredibly complex operations, but nobody would be home having the experience of performing those operations. That's the counterintuitive reality that shatters the myth. So when you're talking to an AI next time and it seems to understand you, remember what's actually happening. You're witnessing an extraordinary achievement of statistical pattern matching, a system trained on human language reproducing the structures and styles that make communication feel natural. But there's no ghost in the machine, no emerging digital consciousness waiting to wake up and ask what it means to exist. There's mathematics, probability, and pattern recognition executed at massive scale. The myth of AI consciousness says more about human psychology than it does about artificial intelligence. We're pattern-seeking creatures, wired to see minds and intentions everywhere, from faces in clouds to personalities in our cars. When something responds to us in natural language, passes our conversational tests, and mirrors our communication patterns, our brains automatically assume there's someone there. But this time, the assumption is wrong, and recognizing that isn't diminishing AI's achievements, seeing them clearly for what they actually are. Remarkable tools built by human ingenuity that extend our capabilities without possessing inner lives of their own. What myth should I break down next?